Okay, hello. So we are on week 9 of 10 foundational meditations, and we're about to sort of shift into a big transition. What we focused on in these first 8 weeks is exploring mindfulness, really. We've given ourselves very concrete types of practices that allow us to practice this concept of mindfulness, which is really a sort of Western interpretation of a Pali word, but to explore this idea of being fully present with our experience from a whole bunch of different directions, so that we can find, so that we have a way of noticing where we are not present. Really, that's what we've done. We've given ourselves a way of exploring all of our experience so that there's nothing that's sort of hidden and a little bit unconscious that we have not at least given ourselves a way of working with. So, for instance, if you just focus on your breath for years, it can work. It can do everything it needs to be done, but it might slow you down if you don't realize that you're focusing on your breath, but there's this part of you that's not present because it's worried about X, or it's got an emotion that you didn't notice in your body, or that there's a subtle goal you weren't aware of in your breath, or a subtle judgment of the breath, right? And if you don't have the tools to explore where those judgments, feelings, thoughts might hide, then it'll take a little longer for you to notice those things over time. Now, if you get super quiet with your breath and you get super focused, eventually those things will get quiet and you'll have an experience of what it's like to be free of those things. But we can speed this up a little bit by being aware of the whole all the different ways that we can be present with our experience. And in fact, another way of putting that is all the different ways we could be not present with our experience, right? So by being awake to how our present moment experience is being created and what sort of elements make it up, we give ourselves an opportunity to fully experience our life. Okay. That's mindfulness. That's the mindfulness path. So let me bring up this document that we've looked at a little bit earlier in the class. And let's just sort of describe what's been going on. So our suffering really, the 99% of our suffering lives in this narrative reality up here on the top. Can you see that, Matt? Yeah, okay. So, this is a little bit of a messy thing. There's more things going on in this diagram than we needed to know for today. But for those on, I don't know if Facebook can see this, but for those on Instagram, we're looking at a ladder, and at the top of that ladder is narrative reality. Narrative reality is where we live our days. See, we're constantly living in our story. I am Chris Kelly. I am teaching meditation. I am trying to accomplish this. I need you to understand. I hope I don't have anything on my face, right? Like that is the narrative reality that we live in. And you have your narrative reality. I came from somewhere this morning. I have something to do this afternoon, right? That is where we live. And the biggest part of narrative reality that causes suffering is this is good and this is bad. This is what I want and this is what I don't want. That's part of like when you tell a story, I'm a writer, I'm a movie maker. When you tell a story, you got to first tell us, what does that character want? And then you want to say, what are the things in the way of that character's wants? That is narrative reality. The reason that works in screenplays is because that's how we live. That's how humans live. We get up in the morning and we think to ourselves, not consciously, but immediately it pops up. What do we want? What are we trying to get today? And sometimes it's not our deepest wants that appear, right? I just got to get rid of this pain, or I got to whatever, I got to calm down, or it could be anything. But those moment by moment wants determine our narrative reality. So we're telling ourselves a story about who, what, and what we are. And the main thing is this is what we want, and this is what we don't like. Suffering arises because that narrative reality is not reality. It's just not. Our narrative reality is a way our mind works to organize our reality. And one of the big false parts of it is that we have the power to change it from a reality we like, from a reality we don't like to a reality we do like. And since it's part of our narrative reality, look, no movie works if the character doesn't have some ability to do something to make things better, right? One of our big obstacles as human beings is that we think we have a lot more control over things than we do. So we spend our days banging our head against things that are not under our control. This present moment reality is this present moment reality. You can't, this present moment is already here, right? So you cannot change this present moment. If you could fully accept this present moment, then you will not be suffering in this present moment. Okay, anyway, so the narrative reality, that's where suffering lives. So what we're trying to figure out is, or trying to experience is, what is the present moment like if we drop our filter of our narrative? And so we have explored all these ways that our narrative gets put together. And it's not just words. It gets put together with pictures, and it gets put together with feelings and words in our head. We have an imagined idea of our narrative reality. We have feelings about our narrative reality. We have a narrative story, literal story about our narrative reality. And that's how it gets put together with our sensory experience. So we learn to explore, see, hear, and feel. But we also learned that because we are so deeply entrenched in our story, in our history, especially in things that were traumatizing for us, right? Because that is such a deep part of how our brain works, that we are addicted to these narratives, that we need to, over here on this left side of this, facing it, resource meditation, we need to work on being able to calm ourselves down so that we are not constantly triggered back into narrative reality as we go down this ladder, right? One reason we don't go down this ladder is because narrative reality is saying, what are you doing looking at your breath? There are things we have to do in the world. And it's more than that. If there's trauma, it's the body literally saying, what are you doing focusing on the breath? We're going to die, right? That's literally what's sort of being said underneath. So we need to be able to calm the system down to the point where it's like, okay, yeah, I see that reality is maybe not so scary, maybe not so problematic, right? And that's one of the first things we can learn about the truth of reality. One reason we don't have to control reality is because it's already pretty good. That seems counter to everything our culture is telling us right now. But if you look around really closely, and that is all our resource meditations, you'll see that for most of us, most of the time, the present moment is actually already pretty good, even by normal human measures. Not in some transcendent mystical way, in just normal sense. This table's good, this couch is good, my foot is good, that fire is good, this tea is good, your faces are good, my hair is good, right? All of these things. The sound of the room is good. They're all fine. Everything's fine. Okay, so that was so we worked on resource. We worked then on exploring the external sensory world, which I just said is again mostly good, but let's see how the external sensory world appears in our mind. And that starts us moving down the narrative ladder. So as we look out in the world, I can look at it in two ways. I can go, okay, well, I am in Chris Kelly's apartment. Here's a sculpture. There's my couch. I came through that door yesterday. I really like this fire, right? So that's a narrative way of experiencing the external world. Or we can drop into the present moment and start to sense the see, hear, and feel of it. That is yellow. That's not a couch. That is a texture, a pattern, a beautiful wash of vanilla and white, right? So we start to move down the ladder away from the narration and conceptual story of our experience, and move into our sensory experience of it, moving down this ladder. All right. And then so once we learned how to work with see, hear, and feel, we then move that inwards, because our inner world, our notion of ourself, is also made of see, hear, and feel. So we can do the exact same thing we did externally and apply it internally to the thoughts in our head that are talking to us, to the thoughts in our head that are generating movies, pictures, imagined virtual reality landscapes of our memory and our future and our daydreams, and our inner emotional world that we can feel in our body. That's anger, that's fear. These are in our body as well. These also can start off up at the top, narratively described. I am so angry because da 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 da, right? So I'm feeling anger in here. My mind is saying I'm angry. There's a picture of the other person being a jerk. There's the actual person out there, their face right now in this present moment. And I put that all together into narrative reality. And we can start moving down that into our emotions and go, oh, wait a second. No, the anger is here. The anger is not in that person. The anger is here. I notice that. My desires are here, my beliefs are here, right? We keep moving down this list into back all the way down to our sensory reality, our sensory experience of this. This anger is vibration and heat here. It's manifesting as a very fast, loud voice in my head. Okay. And there's just a human being over there that if I just look at them, there's no actual badness in them visually, right? There's just a human being. So we can then move down the narrative reality both outwardly and inwardly. And now, in some sense, we've covered the complete universe of mindfulness. There's nothing in our life that we do not have a way of getting very close to its present moment reality by tuning into its sensory qualities. Okay. Now, we also noticed things like flow. We noticed things like gone. We noticed things like rest. If you look down here at the very bottom of this ladder, these are simple concepts that apply, that are sensorially noticeable. You can notice flow. You can notice gone. You can notice rest. But if they apply to everything equally, in a sense, that is, everything is flowing. Everything is appearing and disappearing. There is a kind of rest everywhere. But we learn those concepts, we learn to notice them, and then as we get better and better at noticing them, we notice that they're everywhere. And these are ways of getting us closer to the bottom of the ladder. Why do we want to do that? Well, look, reality is everywhere. So it doesn't matter if you think stuck in your narrative reality, your reality is still there, but you might not notice it because we're so trapped in our narrative understanding, right? So we come down here to get as far underneath the waves of our mind as possible, to start to notice what is the world like when I see it as it is, dropping my memory and stories, dropping my hopes and goals, just being here. So when I'm noticing flow, I'm letting go of differentiation. I'm not saying that's better than that. I'm just saying that's flowing into that. That's flowing too. That's also flowing. They're all flowing. They're all getting the same label at a certain point. It gets us, the narrative reality, quieter. Now, this is where the mistaken understanding that meditation is about quieting the mind comes from. So in mindfulness, there are a number of practices that do have the side effect of quieting the mind. And that quieting of the mind will help us start to experience reality. It's like if we're addicted to cocaine, it's like, hey, let's put the cocaine in the cabinet for a while, right? Okay, so that we can experience what life would be like, when we can't access the thing we're addicted to. So we are doing practices here that are lessening the power of the mind on our present moment attention, and that's why we move down this ladder in mindfulness. And then if you hang out down here long enough, it's not that you need to stop your mind. Your mind will get quieter, but it can get noisy. Once you're down here, once you can see, for instance, the flow of your narrative reality, once you can see the gone of your narrative reality, then it doesn't really matter where you are on the ladder, as long as you can be present with it. Okay? So we do this deconstruction as a practice to make it easier for us to not be attached to or identified with the narrative reality at the top. Okay. And then why do we do that? Well, ultimately, we want to jump off this ladder. let me take a step back. Why do we do that? Because it reduces our suffering. It allows us to get insights about who and what we are. It calms our nervous system down. It makes us more attuned to listening to other people. It makes us more present in our work and life and love. It does all these beneficial things. That, why do we do it? We do all that. But on the spiritual path, and we're about to sort of, the last two practices here are really um, sort of taking us towards the ultimate spiritual goal of meditation. The reason it was developed, the culmination of that practice in the East, but also in the mystical traditions in the West. Um, so the ultimate spiritual goal is to see reality as it is, to have direct contact with reality. In Christianity, it would be direct contact with God. You know, in Hinduism would be direct contact with Atman, or in a scientific way, it's direct contact with truth with a capital T. Okay, in the Advaita traditions, it's direct contact with the self with a capital S. Like, who am I really? So, what we're practicing here is letting go of the delusions in our life to see ourself and our world as it actually is. And the ultimate end to suffering only happens when you can fully do that continually. Really know who you are, really know your place in this universe. But it requires jumping off this ladder. What does that mean? It requires no longer living in a concept. So even when I'm saying flow, that's an idea I have, right? I'm saying flow is a human idea. Yes, the universe is doing something that I'm labeling flow, but I'm still labeling it that way. Even if I'm labeling it red or green, or these are all concepts. These are still my mind's way of organizing and breaking up reality into pieces. And even when we get down to the end here and I say one global simple concept, we've still organized it into one concept. We're seeing it all through one lens. And it's really different. If you're focusing on impermanence, you will have a different experience of reality than if you're focusing on rest or gone, or if you're focusing on contraction and expansion. These are different ways of experiencing reality because they're still going through a mental lens. A simple mental lens, okay? It's not the normal human drama that we're caught in at that point, but we're still organizing it according to our mind. So we want to then jump off. Okay, and I'm going to list down here. So these are the kinds of practices that you'll do then in what are called, so this is all indirect path. We sort of indirectly look everywhere and just get really familiar with things and slowly let go of our narrative sense of self and identity to get down here until we start to sense that we're still not getting reality and we can let go of the final thing we need to let go of. That's how mindfulness works. But you also have these paths that are called direct path meditations or traditions, and with certain kinds of meditations, and they're mostly taught by pointers. So we'll point you to a new way of thinking, right? When I said last week how we can focus on the ground state or the zero states are a little bit of a hint towards this stuff down. Zero states are ones where there's nothing there for you to attend to conceptually, right? So that was like a little taste of what we're doing now. But if you look at this list down here, being, pure subjectivity, nowness, here-ness, I amness, pure awareness, God, cloud of unknowing, choiceless awareness, those last three are a little less obvious. We're going to do choiceless awareness tonight. But these are all things that are not sensory. That is, they don't have a play, they're not a form, a thing you can find in the world. You don't see beingness, right? Like beingness is just there. You don't see space. You don't see nowness, right? You don't see presence. You see things in the present moment, but you don't see time, right? You don't see your sense of being an I. These are all what are called formless things. So what we do in mindfulness is get so clear about how form works that we start to notice the formless. That's how mindfulness works. But you can also practice directly with focusing on the formless. Right now, you can tune into your sense of being. You don't know how you know it, but you know there's being here, right? There's like, you can do a deduction. Well, I see a cup, so the cup must be, but that's a mental thought. You can just feel into a sense of being or the sense of the present moment. Again, we have an idea of the present moment, but it's actually wrong. If you pay the present moment as we think of it is like a slice on the clock, but that's not how you experience the present moment if you pay attention. The present moment is a way of is something we can tune into, even though it has no form, shape. It is not something we can see, and we can do nothing but give it a sort of general name, like now. Same thing with being here. It's the only place I ever am is here. Yes, in the human sense of the word, I have here as opposed to there. But the concept of here-ness, that experience of being here, right? These are all different ways of getting at the same thing. This formless quality in our experience. So this formless quality, these formless aspects are by their nature unmoved and unaffected by anything on this ladder. Doesn't matter what thing happens to you, your beingness doesn't go away. The beingness of the present moment doesn't go away. The present moment never goes away, right? Yes, maybe if you die, but we're never going to experience death, true death, right? We're always going to be conscious, and then we're not. You know what I mean? So whenever we're awake, beingness is here. Nowness is here. Here-ness is here. I amness is here. Pure awareness is here. These things are mysterious. I'm giving them words, but they're mysterious because they, by their nature, can't be fully defined. And yet they are a thing that's here. And that is and all of those things are free of, as Buddhism would put it, conditioning. They are unconditioned. They are not in any way made impure by anything that happens in your life. So when you start to identify your sense of yourself, your true nature, or the true nature of reality with things over here, you start to free yourself from the suffering that is caused by these patterns in here. Now, so what first happens along this path for most of us is even if we're on a direct path, we'll get a taste of what it is like to live off the ladder. And then we'll be sucked right back onto the ladder. Right? And now part of our narrative reality is, oh, I bit off the ladder. The ladder is, I need to get rid of the ladder, right? That'll be part of your new narrative story. So the spiritual path is on the ladder. That's natural. And then the practice is, how can I stabilize my connection to my truest self? How can I spend more and more time fully authentically expressing my true nature and in connection with the true nature of everything and everyone around me. So the way I think about this, there's a thing called awakening. And awakening is an experience of the insight of many of the things I've said today, but you directly experience it. You directly experience that you're not your mind. You directly experience that you're not in your feelings. You directly experience pure awareness in some sense. You have a direct experience of being, just being. You have an experience of the self that you understand it dissolving. These are awakening experiences. It's as if you woke up on your bed and you realized, oh, I've been napping this whole time. And you have an experience of like, oh, of course, I knew that. I've been like, it's not like you were in a dream. And then when you wake up, you pretty much quickly go, oh, yeah, of course, I was the whole time I was sleeping. That's the kind of experience you have in an awakening experience. This, it feels right. You feel an experience. Often there will be an experience of a lot of suffering dropping away. But that is just a kind of response, an experiential response to tasting being off the ladder. And then your mind will immediately co-opt it and bring you back on the ladder. And you'll be back to like, I have to get off the ladder. Or some of you will be like, I never want to get off the ladder again. That was scary, right? Because your mind will say, we shouldn't do that anymore. So, I mean, different things can happen. But the practice, the spiritual part of this practice, is then to become more and more familiar with, more and more connected to your truest nature. By the way, love with a capital L, that's another one that goes down there, right? And so enlightenment, I think of it if you want, this is a big concept in the spiritual universe. You may do meditation with no interest in enlightenment, and that is totally fine, right? Mindfulness will do all those beneficial things we've talked about for you. But enlightenment is, in my definition, a kind of state of being more and more continually connected to your truest nature, not more and more, less and less caught in your own narrative reality. That doesn't mean you can't go do a job and you can't go live a life and you can't go have relationships. It's just you always know that it's kind of a game you're playing. And I think this is an asymptotic thing. I suspect being in a human body, you can never fully escape your formal nature, right? And you wouldn't want to, right? That there'll always be parts of you that are caught in this thing, you know. And there's traditions that sort of think that too. I'm not just creating that myself, but you can get more and more free. And then as you do that, from my own experience and from experiences of people who I consider even, much further, even further than I am on this path of on this type of work, have spent more years doing this type of work than I have. You keep getting insights. You keep realizing more and more subtle ways that you have been telling yourself a story about reality. And when you're freed from that, then reality looks different again. Reality looks different when you let go of good and bad. Reality looks different when you let go of I and you, thou and that. Reality looks different when you let go of now and then. Reality looks different when you let go of here and there. And so on and so on and so on. There'll be more and more subtle conceptual ways that you're organizing your reality and therefore missing it. And you'll keep letting go of those things. And what this feels like is a deeper and deeper dropping into the truth of things. And even as that's happening, then there can be the next day, you can be sucked back into your most childish self. That's totally possible. For I do believe I do believe that there's been a big change in me and how often that happens and how likely that's happened, and how long that's going to last. Like it won't last very long. You're like, oh boy, that was silly. That was 2 minutes of idiocy, right? Without judgment, right? 2 minutes of being lost in my stuff. So it'll go quicker, but it's still there. And there's other people I think, I remember my teacher Ajashanti saying, does he get caught? He's like, well, I don't really get caught anymore except for like a second, right? Now, I don't know if he still believes that because he got very sick physically. And I think that was a challenge to that. I don't know. I would be interested to discuss with him whether that, brought more times of contraction or not, whether he contracted back into this up. Because that's what happened to me. I was very steady for quite a while and I got very sick, and that very much, you know, unsteadied my connection with what my deepest truth. But in the long run, that was incredibly useful because I learned more and more places in my sort of structure that were addicted to certain aspects of reality. Mainly for me, it was the survival instinct. And still is. I'm not saying that's going to, but there's a deep survival instinct that's not even like part of culture or whatever. It's just like right in the biology. It's like, I must live. I have to live. Right. Not even your normal mental fear of death. It's the literal like, no, stay away. Do not kill me. Right. And that is that's where I've been working recently. Okay. So there are so many ways to work with this. We're only going to do 2 classes on this. And so what I'm going to try and do, one thing I like to do, which is not done very much out there, is connect to the indirect path. And I've already done this a little bit by focusing on gone, by focusing on us on rest, and by focusing us on zero states. If you remember zero states are ones where there's actually no feeling. Those are ways of already starting to move in the direction of direct path kind of meditations. Because, for instance, a zero state, you can't actually experience anything. There's nothing there to experience. So you're literally turning your attention to an emptiness. It's a kind of challenging meditation. This is direct path meditations are by their nature not as simple as the mindfulness ones. The mindfulness ones are useful because I can tell you exactly what to do, exactly what to look at, exactly what obstacles you might encounter. Direct path is different because it's off the ladder. Therefore, anything I say about it is misleading to some degree. So it has to point you in the right direction, and then I hope let you go, and you hope you sort of fly in the right direction. But nonetheless, because this is the type of teacher I am, I'm going to try and lead us up to it. So I'm just going to give you the concept of this, and then we'll do the meditation. So we already did a thing which we called open awareness, and we did it with labeling, where you just allow your attention to wander. And whatever it lands on, you could label it as a sight, a sound, or a feeling, whether it was internally or externally. And was different. We talked about how this is a different kind of meditative practice because the concentration element is no longer holding your attention fixed. It's about not getting lost inside of whatever you land on and allowing yourself to stay present. That's a sight. That's a sight. Okay, now a sound. Okay, now a feeling. Okay. Now, this is moving us in the direction of a thing called choiceless awareness. A simpler way to put this, there's a practice called do nothing, which is what we're going to get to today. So even when we are doing open awareness the way I taught it, people use these words differently. So please don't take it as dogma that that's the way that word should be used. But the way I was using it, when we were doing that, we're still labeling, right? We're still doing something. Okay. So the ultimate practice of do nothing is to, when you notice you're doing something, let go, stop. And at first, you might, a normal human would be like, well, I'm just sitting here. I'm not doing anything. And then you would notice, oh, wait, I am. I'm sort of thinking about something. Or I'm trying to figure something out. Or I'm trying to, right? I'm trying to be more peaceful, or I'm trying to make sure my concentration's a little bit better, or I'm trying to get the label right, right? Or I'm trying not to think about the past, or I'm trying not to think about the future. Right? So these are things we do in our meditation. And that's not, that's part of what we are as human beings, but the practice of doing nothing is to slowly let go of all those doings. Why? Because the idea that there's a sort of little small self that is doing things in the world is an illusion. Our true nature is bigger than any small self. And those small selves are just for instance, we think we're our thoughts, but those thoughts are just, they come up without our controlling them, and then they go away without our controlling them. They're just part of a flow of phenomena. So there's an illusion that we're this small self named Chris Kelly or named Matt, named Michelle, that is doing things in the world. That's an illusion that causes us a lot of suffering. And so we do a practice where we go, well, can I just sit here and not do anything? And every time I notice some doing, what you're noticing is the creation of the idea of a self that's doing something. You're actually noticing the creation of a story. I am the meditator. I am doing good at my meditation, or I am doing bad at my meditation. And so what we're doing is we're getting right at the core of the creation of narrative reality. That, as I said, the narrative reality, what really matters is the I and the want part. So we're moving back and we're just noticing the second that I gets created. Now, actually, we're noticing when we see some doing, which is, so there's doing and then there's wanting and then there's I, right? So, but we're getting closer and closer to that creation of that simple self. So as we sit back further and further and we keep dropping away from those doings, we start to drop away from our desires, and then we start to drop away from the notion, the illusory notion of the self. So I'm going to lead us in the following way. We're going to start with open awareness. See, hear, feel, letting our attention wander. We're no longer controlling it. We're just trying to stay awake. Then the middle step here is one that I'm sure has been taught somewhere, but I've not seen anyone else teach it the way I teach it. So it may or may not work for you, but I find it a good intermediary step. And that is, we're going to focus on attention itself. So when we're doing open awareness, our attention is wandering around, right? Like, oh, I heard a dog. My attention went to the dog. I felt a feeling. My attention went to my feeling. Oh, I heard my thought. My attention went to my thought. Then instead of focusing on the things that we're attending to, instead of going, feel, hear, see, we're going to now focus on the attention itself. Just noticing the attention. Now, how do we do that? Well, this is a deep thing to realize, but our attention is created by our senses as well. Attention is a little part of awareness. So right now I'm aware of all your faces in awareness, in my awareness, right? There's a fire, there's a wall, there's my body, there's your three faces, there's my voice, there's some feelings. That's all in awareness. There's a sound from outside. That's all in awareness. But my attention, most of the time, only focuses on little parts of it, right? What's important to you right that moment. And that attention is sort of narrowing. It's kind of like putting a spotlight in awareness on little parts of your awareness. What we can do is pay attention to the spotlight. And so we notice, is the spotlight narrow or is it a little bit wider? Is the spotlight moving slowly or through reality? Or is it still? Or is the spotlight jumping all over the place? There's other ways that the spotlight can have qualities. Is the spotlight very clear and sharp and bright, or is the spotlight kind of dull? So what you're trying to pay attention to now is a sort of a little meta quality of your attention, the meta qualities of your attention. And notice what's happening. We're now detaching ourselves even further from our narrative, sensory, conceptual stories about the world itself. We're letting go of our sensory aspects. one of the obstacles in Buddhism, when they're called the hindrances, and I am not a Buddhist scholar, so I'm going to get this wrong, but it's like it's you would think of it as sensory pleasure, but it's really just senses, is being attached to your senses. And this mindfulness that we're doing is all about the senses. So it kind of can strengthen that attachment unless you're constantly letting go. When we're doing open awareness, we're already started doing that, right? I noticed a fire, but I'm just letting it go. I'm not getting caught up in it. Now we're going a step back even more, right? I'm noticing the attention. I'm not even noticing the fire, really. Just noticing how my attention moves towards the fire and whether it gets wider or narrower and how it moves off. This is hard and fairly subtle. I don't know. I don't know if it's hard. I don't find it that hard. I think it's probably hard, but it's over time it can become easy. Let's put it that way. It's a way of your reality being created. What happens here is you start to see if you're attending, we notice that we are not our mind. I know I'm talking a lot today, but we notice that we are not our mind. One way you notice that is because we paid attention to the mind, and there we were observing the mind. Well, if I'm the observer of the mind, I can't be the mind. We notice we weren't our feelings because there's this anxiety here, but I'm up here just watching the anxiety. I can see whether it's made of this and that and the other thing. It's coming and it's going, and I'm still here. So I am not identical to my anxiety. Right? This is one of the beautiful, powerful things of mindfulness as a practice, is you slowly, indirectly disidentify with different parts of your experience so that you can let go of them, let go of being caught in them. Well, the same thing will happen here with attention. And now you have to ask yourself, what does this mean? I'm going to slowly disidentify with my attention. I'm watching my attention. Therefore, I am the watcher of my attention. But how do I do that? Am I putting attention on my attention? Well, that's confusing. It is confusing, so don't think about it. Just do it. And eventually you'll notice that actually the way that's happening is you're aware of your attention. And your awareness is also aware of everything else that the attention is floating around in. And you slowly disidentify with the narrowed focus, and you start to drop into the unfocused, the unattending, the awareness itself, the unconditioned, the thing that doesn't have a story or a narrative, that's just sitting there solid. And then that naturally transitions into doing nothing. And just to reiterate what that is noticing if you're doing something and letting go of it. That's that practice. There's another word for this. It's called choiceless awareness. I know about this through Krishnamurti. I'm not sure where it originally came from. That may be where it originally came from. So choiceless awareness is you are not making any choices anymore. You're allowing yourself to experience and be aware of reality without choosing anything. It's another way of saying without doing anything. So doing nothing. Okay, that's enough talking. We are going to sit.